All right, welcome everybody this evening. It's February 6th, and I am calling the February meeting of the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission to order. Will staff please call the roll?
Stacy Gloss,
Here.
Dustin Allred,
Here.
Claire Johnson,
Present.
Todd Rusk, Andrew Stump, Morgan White,
Here.
Tesfaye Wolda Medin.
Very great, thank you. Are there any changes this evening or additions to our agenda? Okay, I don't have any. A copy of the minutes from the January meeting was sent to you last week in the packet that Scott sent out. Is there a motion to approve the January minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, a motion by Morgan. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Second by Claire. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as they were distributed? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes with or without amendment, sorry, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, that passes. We'll go ahead and continue this evening with public input. If at this time a member of the public is welcome to make comments, I believe that there will be a few folks here this evening that that would like to make a comment. You may. Let me see, do we have comment cards that we want people to pass in, or is it just going to be the sign-in sheet at the front? Okay, so when you come up to the table or podium area to make a comment, please be sure to include your name and the topic so we can go ahead and have your information in the minutes. So welcome and thank you. Yep.
Stacy, do they need to say where they're from or where they live? Or what is there a requirement for that?
I think just your name is fine. We do not need, your address or anything like that.
My name is Prashant, and I'm a student at the University of Illinois, and I'm taking Morgan White's class. So as part of our assignment, we were asked to comment on the climate action plan and give a suggestion for the city of Urbana to follow or, look at. So we went over the committee meeting from November where you guys discussed the climate action plan. And one of the matters that was discussed was the iMatter resolution, like the proposal where they had like the goal to meet 100% energy demand by 2040. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of in my classmates, we feel that it's important to have high, lofty goals. The least that's going to happen is that you're not going to achieve it. So that anyway, you're not achieving anything. So you might as well have goals because you might just, start trying to achieve those goals. That's what we thought about the iMatter resolution. And as a suggestion for the city of Urbana to follow, we had a discussion on e-waste management. One of our professors in the university from the material science department conducted a study for a facility in Chicago, and they found that there is no, the people who go for giving their products for recycling, they do not get any kind of rewards or anything. So the percentage of people going to the facility to recycle their products is very less. So what we were proposing as a group was to have a system in place within the campus or somewhere close to campus, because about 45,000 students are enrolled in the university, which is quite a huge number. And since we're a young population, we tend to use a lot of electronic products, and since the technology keeps changing, we tend to keep switching our electronic products as well. So if there is a facility close to campus where people can go to actually give their products for recycling, which would be really helpful. So in this facility, the city can partner with industry, technological people who provide the technology, say Apple or Dell or whoever is providing the product, and then instead of having reuse of the product in the same way as it's given, like just giving a laptop as saying that it's an older version, we were suggesting a system where you can break the product up and like recover resources. So basically a resource recovery system so that the raw materials can be extracted from a used product and can be used to build new products. So the waste from the used products is reduced, and the requirement for new products to build newer products is like reduced as well. So it works in both ways. That was one of the suggestions that we were discussing. And the other aspects are like more about public awareness, have like more classes in campus where students can learn about sustainability. And an interesting discussion came up because we had like few exchange students from Spain, I guess, and they were discussing how Europe is much well advanced in terms of acting for like climate goals. So Europe has the emissions of carbon dioxide emissions in Europe are like 3 times lesser than as it's in the United States, and they have like government incentives in place where the people who are taking initiatives are given incentives, like giving cheaper loans or having stricter regulations for new building codes. So basically we were talking about public awareness and government participation with the help of public and private entities who are willing to work for the environment. So these were the 2 main concepts, like the 2 main suggestions I can say for the city of Urbana if they want to, as part of our assignment is what we had to do it. So so basically I have like 2 more friends here who would be willing to add comments. So thank you.
Prashant, thank you so much for speaking. Before you get up and go back to your seat, are there any questions from the commissioners? Okay, thank you very much for your input this evening. We really appreciate it.
Hi. Hello. Okay. Hi, I'm Mega from California. I'm also a student at the University of Illinois studying urban planning. A part of my assignment as well was to look over the November 7th committee meeting and to give some recommendations or talk or ask some questions. So my group got together and we came up with some recommendations, and including the community. Since a big aspect of urban planning is public engagement, we think it's important for the Sustainability Advisory Commission to really engage with the students of University of Illinois. There are certain institutions like IC and all of those existing, and I think to get more people to give public input at the Sustainability Advisory Commissions, it would be also good to talk to people who are part of the environmental concerns RSOs on campus, since there are about 1 to 3, I believe, RSOs that work in environmental concerns. And then we are also talking about starting from elementary school all the way to private organizations and getting out what exactly all the aspects of the climate action plan are, and so being socially impacting talking about this at a social level really addresses like the impact that it'll have on the future. So we talked mostly about the social aspect and how having a public like input by actual people who are a part of the community and who will be a part of the community for at least 4 years or more is very important. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks also for filling out the sheet. And would you also like to speak?
Yep. Hello, I'm Kulsum Abbas. I'm also in Miss White's class. My group decided to say was that, okay, for the I Matter proposal to move your resolution and to move the pledge to 2040 and to reduce the carbon emissions 100% by 2040, it is a very passionate goal, but whether it's doable or not is my main concern, and it is a commitment. And for me personally and my group, we'd like to commit to a goal and follow through. We just don't want to commit and not do it. And so, and to make an educated pledge, there is also a website, UK, because UK's goal is also to reduce their carbon emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And they made this website, and it has this calculator which calculates your carbon emissions and your energy production, your energy consumption, and the resources that you produce your energy by, and the ways that you consume it by, and it has this Excel sheet in which you can input the data. So what we suggest is to for the SAC to look into that, to download this Excel sheet and input Urbana, City of Urbana's data or Champaign County's data, and make an educated guess. How much potential does the city or the county have to actually produce clean power? How, and also not to produce, but how, in which sectors and which industries can we reduce our consumption, power consumption, to move towards that goal? And if we can actually do it, then definitely yes, go forward with the pledge and go forward with the net neutrality by 2040. And what are and then only then we can, if we know how much potential the city or the county has, only then we can move towards the solution on what other things we need to do to achieve that goal. That was one thing. And then the other thing was that in order to achieve those goals, we need to, it's easier to regularize the industries, for example, the transportation industry or the commercial industries, to and to, let's say, regularize their power input. You can say you cannot use the fossil fuels, or you have to have a 50% or 80% power coming from these renewable resources. But it is very hard, and the impact is very, very small when it comes to residential buildings or that sector. So maybe you can standardize the fuel consumption and the fuel in the transportation industry, in the commercial industries. Another thing was to improve the transportation and in the sense that public transportation, bicycling, and the conditions of the road, because I haven't gotten a chance to roam around the streets of Urbana, but I did did an assignment on the Champaign one, and the roads are not very friendly for the pedestrians or for the for the people on the bikes. So it would be really helpful to improve the road conditions and to provide more opportunities for the people on the bike. And then there's one more thing, because the consumers, if we do focus on the residents here in Urbana, they are paying for the energy. So it should be their decision if they want to buy clean energy, and if they are willing to pay for it, why not? So they should be given the choice to consume green energy if they want to. If they want to pay more for it, there shouldn't be a standard as to they cannot. So they should have more choices into as to where they're getting their energy from. Thank you so much.
Just to clarify, the clean energy in Urbana is actually right now, I think, at a lower price than the conventional grid. Scott, could you share that number? Isn't it the half a cent lower or something like that through the municipal aggregation program?
Yeah, we competitively select electric supply for all of our residents. We put them into a big purchasing group, so bulk purchasing, and we get a better price for electricity that way. And by creating some space in terms of what they would otherwise pay, we buy renewable energy credits for the full consumption of all the folks who are in our bulk purchasing group. So most of the time, we're saving residents money on that power bill, and then also buying the renewable energy credits. But that's just for the residential sector. It doesn't apply for commercial.
All right. Thank you so much. Since I don't get an electric bill, I don't know anything about
Sure,
it.
sure.
All right, are there any other questions?
Can we have a copy of the reports that come out, or is there any written summary that comes from the class? So we have a record of these?
Every student wrote a comment. I failed to ask them if I could just pass them along, so I need to ask them, but I'll pass along all the ones they said yes to.
Oh, okay. Well, just some, and this I think would go for the Prashant's comments also, but, some common themes come up. The question of targets and goals, the debate between, be really aggressive and see what you can do versus let's see what is realizable and achievable. And anyway, we've been in the middle of that push and pull, and not quite sure where the right answer is, but I think that's a natural tension that we have to deal with. And there was some discussion on e-waste, and I guess the university has been, and student projects have been a place where some innovation has happened in that area, and I guess it would be nice to see more along those lines. One aspect on the e-waste that I didn't hear was so young people go through lots of iterations, and so is there design? Can there be innovation so that you can keep the same product in your hand and do the updates, and I guess maybe some shared responsibility. Not that I'm against better recycling infrastructure. Student engagement, that's great. And transportation for pedestrians and bicycles. We touched that here, and of course there's the pedestrian advisory commission is as well. Anyways, I really appreciated all those comments.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public here that would like to provide public comment to the commission at this time? Okay, yes, Amanda.
Hi there. Thank you for having us. Okay, I've got a handful of issues. They're somewhat disjointed, but I'll try and string them together. One is impact and measuring for impact. Oh, my name is Amanda Soskin. I'm a member of the Urbana community. I have a background in, I guess, real estate, finance, and systems and social impact design. Okay, impact. I guess what I wanted to suggest, or what's not clear when I look through some of the the agenda items and possibly the minutes, is exactly the impact the city has with regards to its actions and how it intends to measure its impact. So, for example, on today's agenda, and you'll get to it a bit later, we'll talk about a rain barrel initiative and in-house composting. So, and there'll be some sort of a day and some educational events in which the community will be asked to come together and they potentially can collectively purchase some of this equipment. So the question is, this has been done in previous years, and the question would be, what's the impact of these initiatives? What do we know of our households and our communities in terms of our residential communities and our the business community and obviously industrial participants in terms of what it is that they do? What does our community think about this type of thing? How impactful is it? 60% of Urbana residents, I understand, are renters. How do renters reconcile composting if, for example, they live in a building in which doesn't have the capacity to compost? Can we do composting differently in terms of community composting, industrial composting? There isn't really a silver bullet to this outcome, but there could be a number of ways to slice the pie. And how does the council, obviously, and the city, therefore, regard these types of items? And rainwater, for example, and again, these sort of relate to anything that you will consider. A barrel will have a very small impact in terms of what it is that you retain and how you use grey water. You might obviously have a barrel at the end of your drain, and it'll collect water, but you can't use that for any length of time. If you consider sort of the conditions, the weather patterns, the conditions going forward, we'll have extreme sort of bouts of rain at sort of potentially longer periods of time in between rainfall in terms of what does those weather projections look like, and in terms of a barrel, what can that really provide your residents in terms of economic value? Very little. If you had a rain barrel system in terms of, well, how much does your roof actually provide in terms of runoff, how much do you actually use, and start to sort of think about the economics of our system, then you might actually your community can sort of try to figure out kind of, does that work for us? And also for purposes of the educational component, they probably realize that there's some economic value, and they might consider a system rather than a barrel. So again, how do you look at these things sort of systematically? Also, really, in terms of impact, I would suggest to have an economic development type conversation really with any initiative that you talk about. If we're talking about an array of solar panels, is that something that we can manage locally? Is there a business, if we're going to go through to solar panels, is there something that we can set up locally that can maintain, can provide, can produce, can be advanced in terms of the technology, because we obviously have a research center. Is that something we can do here locally? Can we set up a business, not a not-for-profit, but a business that sustains our own economy in terms of use of those products? Because it's the direction we're going. We want more renewables. We want to think about our water waste management. We want to think about waste holistically. There are businesses that you can actually build and more community resilience, community wealth in terms of how you address those. Prashant mentioned waste. There's a concept called circular economy, and that's where you holistically think about your waste in terms of your inputs and your outputs. So Mr. Rusk mentioned, can you design for longevity rather than obsolescence? Absolutely, and that should be something that university takes on, because obviously they're at the forefront of these types of initiatives. So you're designing for longevity. You have different types of business models that allow you to keep the products, materials, or the end product in use for longer. You're incentivizing durability. Also, you have different types of financial models that allow for that aren't necessarily purchase. They're more like lease models. So if you're Philips, you lease the lighting. Philips retains the ownership of the lighting and will maintain it. You therefore lease it as the city or as the University of Illinois. If you're University of Illinois, you're at the school or whoever you are, or you're at the hospital, and you want to buy chairs, office chairs, you go to Steelcase potentially, and you buy the type of chair that you can return to them. They will dismantle it, and they will reproduce the item. Therefore, it doesn't go to waste, and technically you have a stream for its disposal before you even purchase. You know exactly where it's going after its useful life. So that's something called the circular economy, and the emphasis there is the sort of designing for circularity. And I think in terms of the SAC and in terms of how the city looks at all of its processes, to really think in terms of a circular system. You don't want anything to touch landfill, or really, you really want to know in terms of when you purchase a product, use a product, what its life cycle will look like ahead of even, as part of your research. I'd like to ask the SEC to also consider a zero waste plan. This is something consistent with the idea of circularity and to go hand in hand with the climate action plan. And again, it's waste. It's a more holistic look and view at waste, how we think about it, and not waste as in sort of where we put it, but more like waste as a resource. It's value. A lot of money went into creating those products and natural resources. So there's something there, there's value there, and it will become more incrementally valuable as planetary resources become more valuable, more scarce. So what can the city do to be more proactive in that regard? And then community engagement, also I had an item, and that was your community can help. So in terms of zero waste, could that be a community initiative? Because again, it's economic development. It's improving the economic reliance or resilience of families and businesses in the community. And I think with more community engagement and bringing them to the table in terms of their ideas, that Urbana can achieve many of its outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, Amanda. Any questions from commissioners? That's great. I think, okay, so one of the things that we will have during the meeting is we'll have other opportunities for public input as well to ask some questions this evening. This is sort of for everybody to know as well. After the staff report, and then also after the presentations by the people who are presenting on the agenda this evening, so that maybe a point to further discussion on some of these items that you brought up, and we would certainly welcome that. And thank you for bringing this forward. I appreciate it. Okay. For communications this evening, Scott, will you share the staff report?
Sure. Good evening, Commission, and thanks to everyone who came out today and spoke. It's really wonderful to have so many folks here, really invigorating to have you participate in our meeting. First, some updates on Climate Action Plan progress. First, we're working with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association again on a third round of our Solar Urbana-Champaign program. We're always trying to add something new to this. So last year we added language asking solar installers to propose a power purchase agreement as well as a cash purchase agreement. This year the new item we're adding is based on some requests from folks in Monticello. We're expanding our market area to include Piatt County. So we're going to be a little bit bigger geographic expanse, have some more folks eligible. So we're working on developing that RFP and also putting together an advisory commission. And Stacy, did I see an email from you on that?
Yeah, I sent something earlier today.
I didn't get a chance to read it. I don't know if you have anything to add, but.
Oh, the thing that I would add is that it was just about interest from commission members in terms of who would like to volunteer for that committee, and that I will speak with Morgan and Todd later about that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Scott, I have a question. Is it still going to be called UC Solar?
Solar UC?
Solar UC? Solar UC? UC, the Solar UC?
Yeah,
CC?
we're still the
I think
the
we should
center.
keep the name,
Yeah.
Right, okay.
There's been no discussion of changing the name.
Except to make it called Solar UC.
Well, it's always been Solar UC, or Solar Urbana-Champaign. You can call it whatever you want. It's fine. I also have a note in here that we're working, supporting a lot of other cities who are working on 2-megawatt solar arrays in their own cities. It's really exciting to have colleagues from other cities calling and asking how we selected a vendor. There's a lot of interest in the incentives that are in the new Future Energy Jobs Act. So I'm glad that we pursued the procedure we did and got a developer early, because I think all of those incentives are going to get used up very quickly. So really exciting to see. It's going to be a big 2 years for solar. We're working on a couple of data management tasks right now. One is benchmarking the city's 6 or 7 buildings in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We do this every year so that we can track weather-adjusted performance of our buildings. What I'm seeing so far is that our performance is, in most cases, statistically insignificant change. Some buildings are using a little bit less power, but essentially we're holding the line on energy use in our city facilities, and that reflects our position where we're just maintaining equipment at this point. We're not in a position to improve equipment at this point. We're also working to collect all of the necessary data for our greenhouse gas inventory. This year we'll be doing the community-wide greenhouse gas inventory. We're working on revising and publishing an invitation to bid for a one-day rain barrel and compost bin sale. We're working towards the first Saturday in May for that sale. That would coincide with the first Market at the Square day. So there'll be a lot of folks already downtown who will be able to see our sale and stop in, as well as all the folks who are going to be advertising too as well. I don't have it in front of me, but every year we have the total sales for that event, and every year I think that maybe this will be the year that sales start to decline, and then at some point we'll say, well, we got all we could out of working on that and not do it anymore, but that hasn't happened yet, so we'll keep holding that sale and encouraging home gardening and water conservation and food scrap composting at home.
Scott, do you get feedback from people who participate, and why do they participate? What do they what do they like, or would prefer more than what is available? Any kind of feedback on what's going on out there?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's similar to the bulk solar program in that folks who are definitely want to collect rainwater right now or definitely want to compost right now, they don't wait. They go out and buy or build whatever they need for those activities. What we're doing is driving the price down a little bit and creating an event that moves people who are on the fence about those activities into actually doing those activities with that incentive. And so what people say is they're really appreciative of the price. The rain barrel prices are easily half of retail. So folks are really excited about being able to buy a rain barrel for half the price. And then the compost bins are also below retail, and not quite half, but certainly below. And then I'm really pleased that we're always able to plug in the University of Illinois Extension Service to do public education there. So folks talk about different aspects of composting typically is what most of those conversations are. So that's what it amounts to is we're moving folks who are on the fence into these practices. Moving on to U-Cycle. We've talked before about the state's new electronics recycling law. It's a product stewardship type law whereby manufacturers of electronics are picking up some of the costs of recycling electronics and taking some of those costs off of the cities. There are several options to engage with that process. One of them is a permanent electronics recycling facility, but the state statute does not provide for the facility, does not provide for funding for the facility. It provides funding for the removal and processing of the electronics. Furthermore, one of the complicating factors for us to cite such a facility is the law provides for the manufacturers to pay all the costs of collection, transportation, recycling, disposal, but it does not obligate them to pay the the facility for collecting, being the retail operation and taking in the electronics recycling. What that means is for metal scrap recyclers who now are accepting pretty much all recyclables except CRT, TVs, and monitors, they would actually lose money because they would go from making money on accepting electronics to only being able to take them for free and pass them on at no cost to the manufacturer-funded procedure. Therefore, none of the existing electronics recyclers, metal recyclers, are interested in giving up that revenue just to be a part of the state-funded program. If we started a new facility, then we have all of those facility costs on us. So that's not viable either. So where we are at is in this coming year, we're going to take the second pathway in the state statute, which is we're going to continue to run 2 single-day electronics recycling events. And unlike in the past, some of the costs of those events, materials, transportation, and ultimate costs of recycling and disposal will be picked up by the manufacturers. So in the end, we're doing the same thing and paying less of the costs. So that's a benefit. But the ability to have a permanent facility is not coming together at this point. Any questions on that?
Do you see any hope in amending the legislation? I mean, obviously, that's a different kind of pathway. But I don't know. Do you have a sense of whether the legislation is close enough that an amendment could make it a more viable kind of thing?
In terms of this particular problem I've described, the only immediate solution to it would be more money from the manufacturers to the facilities. I don't know if that's viable in terms of legislation. And it may be that the folks who have advocated for this law, in particular the Illinois Product Stewardship Council, is happy enough to have some of the costs taken off of their one-day collection events that they may choose to move on to other things. So I don't know. I haven't heard any talk. And by the way, recycling coordinator Courtney Kwong works with that group. They've only been in existence for a few years and got this recycling law passed, so it's pretty impressive. I haven't heard any talk from any of the folks involved, including Courtney, about working to amend that law. Everyone's working to implement what they can from it at this point. So,
okay. Thanks.
Courtney's also working with the Urbana Park District to develop a backyard composting workshop, so it's an educational opportunity. There will be folks from the city's Arbor Division as well as master gardeners who will be participating in that with them. A note about our discussion later on, we, staff and Stacy and Councilor Jacobson and others had discussed different means to generate funding for sustainability or energy and climate activities. One of the concepts that staff was asked to look into was the potential of increasing the natural gas consumption tax by some increment to fund energy and climate activities. When we investigated that, it turns out there's a statutory limit for a maximum that cities can charge in terms of a tax on natural gas consumption, and the city of Urbana is already at that limit, so that concept is not viable. And we'll discuss funding more when we get to that agenda item. A couple other items we're working on, some other term contracts, nuisance vegetation abatement contracts, and we're also implementing a new asset management and work order system at Public Works. That goes along with 2 other new software procurements that are improving city operational efficiency. There's a new financial management system and a new permitting system in the community development department. These are all being implemented simultaneously. So thank you to the IT department who's helping with all of those. We had, in the past, had a vice chair for this commission, and it occurred to me to look up what our ordinance says regarding a vice chair, and it provides for the mayor to appoint a vice chair. So a vice chair would do what Stacy does when Stacy is not here. So I want to bring that up for consideration if someone is interested in volunteering to be the vice chair. You can think about that.
We'll have folks think about it and get back to you before the next meeting. Hopefully, we'll name somebody by then.
Our next meeting would be March 6th at 7 p.m. I've moved it upstairs to the executive conference room, so it's a little bit more of a working environment. We're going to have Lori Pearson from the Planning Division take us through an exercise visioning future for the Lincoln Square area. So I've moved it upstairs so it's a little bit more collaborative.
Sorry, before we are set on that meeting space, I know that maybe we're limited on the different types of meeting spaces that we have to hold these meetings, but if we have a turnout anything like this evening, that room will fit maybe 15 people comfortably, but it will not be nearly enough seats or space, and we'd have people spilling out into the hallway, and it would just be sort of a big mess. So if we do have classes from U of I or folks that are going to come and speak, I think that we need to explore options for a larger room.
Sure. At your discretion, we can stay in this room or think about a different room.
Didn't we talk about having it in this room at some point, but with moving the tables into this, making it sort of a open, so it doesn't have kind of this wall?
Yeah, I think that's viable as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think that we're going to explore changing the room setup here to fit the needs, so that way we can sort of all engage in that sort of envisioning process, and we look forward to that. Okay, thank you, Scott, for looking into that. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Scott on the report at this time? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for public comment or questions. If anybody has any questions specifically about the report that they just heard from the city, if you would like to ask a question or give comments on that at this time, you are welcome to do so. Okay, we're going to move on with our next agenda item. This evening in our continuing business agenda item, we have public engagement. Todd or Andy, are either of you going to speak about what you've been working on?
So what I have is we've talked about public engagement here in the past, and there's some comments here in the audience about that. And anyway, so what Andy and I have for tonight is a draft framework for how we might go about doing that. And we thought before going off and talking with a bunch of people, maybe we might just frame up some ideas on what are the goals, what's the context, and why are we doing that, and hopefully have some consensus on that, and then we'll be off and running. And so as we all know, we've the city has committed to aggressive greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals. We're trying to be part of the worldwide effort to mitigate the effects of climate change. And so in the Climate Action Plan, we're looking at other commitments as well, but in the Climate Action Plan, we're looking at 80% reduction by 2050. And you know, with some of the efforts and with municipal aggregation, we've made some progress. But you know, I think to really, you know, the city's going to need some help to go all the way to the 80% and beyond, if that's what we all decide to do. The Climate Action Plan also has some discussion on the need to address adaptation, and so in this context, we're talking about, you know, improving our understanding of possible consequences of a changing climate, and then also how do we prepare ourselves? You know, how do we make reasonable preparations so that the city continues to thrive and that we can continue to provide services that people expect. And in the, you know, when we think about, I guess we can think about with mitigation or with adaptation, I think it's also important to consider that low-income residents and at-risk populations, I think we can expect that they will be affected more significantly or differently than some others. And so when we're thinking about adaptation, I guess you know, I'd like to propose that we think about ways that those actions so that those responses are equitable. So you know, to meet our goals for resilience and this adaptation framework, you know, as people have mentioned, we need to engage the expertise and the interest and the ideas, you know, beyond this commission and the city staff and the council. You know, working with citizens, there's stakeholder groups, both local, regional, national in some cases. Of course, there's the university and other educational institutions. There's advocacy groups, businesses and business groups, youth groups, other units of local, state, and federal government, and then there's sister communities. You know, other communities that are, you know, trying to go down a similar path. We could think about other communities with climate action plans, or the Georgetown University Energy Prize communities, that kind of stuff. You know, we can lean on each other. So when we think about you know, approaches for engagement with that context in mind, come back to the Climate Action Plan and our most recent greenhouse gas emissions inventory. You know, we want to think about, well, where are, you know, if we think about our greenhouse gas emissions as a pie, and presumably we want to deal with be able to deal with the large slices. So when we look at that, 80% is wrapped up in commercial buildings, electricity and natural gas, transportation fuels, and then natural gas in residential buildings. That's 80% right there. And so while residential electricity is also important, I think we've, you know, with the municipal aggregation, we have largely mitigated that. I mean, that's it's temporary, subject to renewal. But if, you know, in terms of thinking about where are we going to have the greatest impacts, I guess I would urge that we think about the commercial sector and transportation sector, and then natural gas in the residential. And so just, you know, just not to prescribe anything too specifically, but just with those sectors in mind, and thinking about, if we're going to engage people, what do we want to engage them on, and in those areas particularly, you know, we can think about in the commercial sector, you know, how do we advance efficiency? Is there an approach for, you know, is there an equivalent approach for aggregation on the commercial side, like what we have for residential? It's a little bit more complicated, but there might be something to look at. And of course, there's renewables. With residential natural gas, look at efficiency, and I think we can also look at conversion to electric in a lot of cases. Transportation fuels, you know, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go there right now. I mean, obviously there's lots of different approaches. We haven't gone so far down that road, but anyway, that's a thing, and hopefully that is, you know, something that you know, a group can address. And then, you know, just thinking about other communities. You know, I think there might be some fruit in researching some of the approaches that other communities have done, especially ones that appear to have been successful. And then, you know, kind of an overarching, how do we do all of these different things in a way that's equitable and with consideration to low-income and at-risk populations. Sometimes there's different funding streams that are available that, you know, that might make some things possible. So in terms of, you know, stakeholder outreach and some engagement ideas, I mean, this is where it gets to the point of, you know, I think, you know, we develop some contact lists and start reaching out to people. You know, Andy and I have started, you know, working on lists. Stacy, you and I have talked about people, but anyways, willing to take input on, you know, any stakeholders that might be interested, you know, willing to engage. And I imagine, you know, not everybody, you know, we can have a combination of informal and formal conversations. You know, thinking about what kinds of things can we work on together. There can be new projects, pilot projects, ongoing initiatives, looking for new funding. I guess we'll have some discussion on that a little bit later. And then, of course, always, you know, important to think about some of the existing funding that's out there and available, and helps make the work easier. So that wraps up what I've prepared, and I think what we would like to share. And I guess I'm interested in you know, any feedback. Does this sound like something that we can start moving forward with and engaging people on? And be happy to hear any comments.
So I really, really like what you guys did with trying to identify the stakeholders or the people to engage with based on the slice of the emissions pie. That is a good way of going about it. There's so many different approaches, and so that starts with our goal and identifies a high impact item and sort of hones in, because there's so many things we can do, and I'm always thinking about all the things. It's hard for me to focus in on one, so I like that a lot. And one that you mentioned a couple times that has been on my mind frequently, I guess, is that commercial sector. Like, I think with the solar UC, was there one commercial building that participated the first round, and then I don't know what happened with the second as far as commercial.
Maybe 2 and 4, something like that. There's a few.
There's less than 10
Yeah.
out of the 80 some that have added rooftop solar through that program. And we were having a conversation earlier today about does a business have a benefit by being green? Like, do we as a community choose to go and shop there instead of somewhere else because of those choices of what they're doing? And I firmly believe that we do make those choices. We choose the better, or the businesses that are behaving sustainably. But I don't think we talk about it. We don't promote it. We don't encourage it much. And so I'm curious, you know, how could we engage the commercial sector through a youth movement for we want to shop at sustainable businesses or something like that, where we could build the culture build the communication about our culture and our expectations for sustainability. Thanks.
One of the questions we had ourselves was, do commercial owners actually involve themselves in other programs that we don't know about? And so are we not capturing all the sustainability that's going on?
I think that's absolutely true. If a business participates in Ameren's Act on Energy Incentives, we don't know. Some businesses participate in the Illinois Green Business Association's programming. If they end up getting certified, that's information that's promoted. Certainly, we know of the dozens of businesses that participated in our Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. But there's others out there that are doing improvements on their facilities, and as you said, we're not capturing that. We don't know about it.
So we wondered how many of those out there are like that, like big corporate programs that are known within the corporation but not.
I think that this is excellent and a really great start and a great basis for a framework moving forward with some of the things that we would like to do. What do you anticipate some of the needs are from the commission in order for you all to sort of head down this path? There were like 3 avenues that are really recommended: the commercial building electricity and natural gas, residential natural gas, and transportation fuels. Is there any one that we want to start tackling, or that you would like to recommend to tackle first, rather than attempting to tackle and to work all 3 at the same time? Just because I know that we're all limited in our capacities, and there's much to explore in terms of building relationships in the community with others that may be interested in this work. So is there one path that you would like to see this head down, at least initially, rather than approaching all 3?
I've already had discussions with our contact in high schools, so they would like to have a communication list started so they can be involved in our decisions and what we want to do, and maybe they can help us.
One thought is that so we could pick a favorite and go with that. We could also, recognizing our limited resources, we could also, just put all of them out there, and we can put something out there, and it doesn't mean that we're going to get a response. So we could also put out all of the ideas and put out a lot of feelers, and maybe it's an initially intensive effort, and then see what captures the most people's imagination. Where do we feel like we have traction, and then maybe do some limiting after we get an initial response. That would be another approach. I don't know what's best.
Both of you, Todd and Andy, I think I'm a little confused about a step that you're talking about taking, putting it out there. What are you meaning by that?
So, we all know lots of people, and we all know lots of organizations, and so, in a sense, putting it out there is making a list or spreadsheet, and phone call.
So on
putting it out there
on the
like,
first call, you call me. What do you say? What's the it? that's what I'm missing.
Working, helping us figure out the climate action plan, how we're going to realize the goals, and for the whole climate action plan, and depending on who the name of the contact person is and who they're associated with, maybe the conversation is focused on one particular topic over others.
Okay, I get that then. So it's tell me if I get it right. So it's reaching out to the people that we know, engaging them, and sharing with them that, here's our plan, here's our goal, and we want to make impactful plans and take impactful actions. What do you recommend? And get that conversation face to face and group to group.
There can be a recommendation, and there's also lots of the organizations and people that we know are actively doing work that is related. And so, we might be able to run along side each other. I don't know what it's going to come out of it, how much fruit it will bear, but, I guess I just feel like we need to do it.
I think it's a great idea because we talk about trying to spread awareness, and I'm always frustrated by that concept, spread awareness, that doesn't get action, but this would be reach out and communicate and have a dialogue about, well, what are we doing now? What are you doing now? What do you want to see happen? I think it's a really great plan.
Thanks.
Sorry for everybody else out there. Would anyone like to, from the public, like to make a comment or speak? Amanda, you can come up. Mm-hmm.
I would like to encourage the council to consider their community resources, obviously, which you're doing, and possibly the university. There are a couple of concepts that are widely used. One is called collective impact. It is a engagement tool where you're essentially creating a networked approach to resolving some of the more important issues. There's also two other sort of thoughts or pedagogies when it comes to community type engagement. One is systems thinking. And this is kind of where you don't go out with the answers, but you go out with a level of inquiry in terms of who you engage and trying to formulate what is your problem set. And obviously you prioritize, you will prioritize, and you have some data around that, which should obviously drive some of those initiatives. And there's also a concept called design thinking. There's a group on campus called Design for America, which would be quite probably interested to take some of this on in terms of helping you structure those types of ideas. So design thinking, and I would recommend the council take a crash course in this type of structure for engagement and how you sort of design and frame problems. It's sort of human-centered design, so rather than looking at transport or thinking of transport in terms of gas mileage or infrastructure, you're thinking of transport for the purposes of mobility. How do you move people and what those impacts are from a systems framework? In terms of the underrepresented communities, everybody wants a leg up. You're looking at value chain. You're trying to create more stable families in terms of economic and environmental consequence. So, what does that actually look like? And how could you have those conversations? And so you're trying to get your community speaking the same sort of language. And the way to do that, or a way to do that, and I would recommend, it certainly is one-to-one conversations, but it's bringing your community together. It is putting everybody around the table with whiteboards and stickies and post-it notes and dots, and really getting the ideas out there. And it's really ideation. It's not the idea that people have to come back with a solution, because who should have a solution? It's the idea that people are coming out with most out-of-the-box ideas toward what it is that you're trying to accomplish, because there's no one idea. So it's the creativity that you can harness in your community and across the nation, because a lot of small towns are grappling with the same issues. And so you're trying to unleash the community creativity. And in terms of prototypes, absolutely. It could be a wood frame prototype to discuss natural gas usage that sits on the corner of a street where you're engaging passers-by. It could be as random as a art installation in terms of kind of how you engage the public in terms of some of these ideas. So I would recommend, again, systems thinking, design thinking, and collective impact as frameworks to become familiar with, and then really encourage the creativity of your community in terms of finding their voice and obviously being part of the solution. Thanks.
Do we feel like we have enough to move forward from this agenda item? We can kind of proceed to the next step. Thank you both for starting this process, and Amanda, thank you for your contributions. Okay. Moving to the next agenda item, we have a presentation this evening on municipal renewable energy bonds. And I would like to introduce Alan Axelrod, who is here with us tonight to provide that presentation. I think if you get it set up on that computer, that we can end up having it projected to that screen. Is that true?
Yeah, if you have a presentation.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Should I just log into my account on this computer?
Sure.
Okay.
You know, I'm like, is this a problem?
The black dots will save me.
And I noticed that the television screens are not on tonight. Are we videoing this evening? Oh, that one is on? Okay, then we're probably fine then. Thanks for checking into that, Scott.
Oh wait, that's just the spreadsheet.
Okay, and also, sorry, Alan, I don't really have a bio or anything to read for you this evening. Would you mind just introducing yourself? Just tell us a little bit about you and what you were working on that made you sort of work on this presentation, and what your interests are.
Start with the long story, okay.
Okay, not a long story. We would like to get out of here by about 9 o'clock this evening, and we do have additional presentations after yours. Thank you.
Yeah, the short version would be I'm a PhD student over at the University of Illinois in agricultural and biological engineering. My expertise points to autonomous systems for something called the bandit problem that has absolutely no bearing on this project other than it's used to sell people ads, and I don't want to do that, so I'm looking into other opportunities to help the community with what I've learned. This is more of a basic presentation, though. Alrighty. So a little bit of context for this. We're going to be talking about the fact that there is $1.25 million in budget cuts proposed for the next 2 years in the Urbana, Illinois budget. Wanted to point out that there are some gaps in social services that, in my view, makes this unacceptable. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go forward with the presentation discussing ways the city can save some money while also pushing forward the green agenda. So the first thing is, of course, in the face of budget cuts, this usually means cuts to social services and municipal staff. One of the things that was particularly interesting in the report was that there was an option to focus on one-time expenditures that will improve efficiency or productivity. Solar panels do fit that model. There are 3 scenarios that one could go over for financing. There is increase the tax levy, which might be talked about later today. There is the city issuing bonds to finance the infrastructure overhaul. There's the city run a deficit to overhaul the infrastructure. Given that the budget cuts were proposed, I don't think that C is particularly likely, but it would be admirable in my book. So we're looking at the Urbana Fire Station on Lincoln. This slide, as many others, were partially provided by Scott Tess. Thank you very much for dealing with those months of emails. So the main thing here is, hey, look, the roof is sunny, probably a good place to look. So this is just more details on the roof. We had already vetted that the solar arrays that we were looking at would provide a similar amount of electricity, but this is where the real detail comes in. So the original analysis done prior to what I'm presenting used a technology cost of $3.44 per watt. The other thing was that they were looking at I want to say a 25 kilowatt system. There it is. And that's really the only two details on this slide that are particularly impactful moving forward. So moving on. The electrical usage as provided in the presentation that Scott Tess forwarded me was about 27 kilowatts for this station. So just for simplicity, rounding out some numbers there. I was able to replicate some of the numbers from the previous analysis using 4 solar watts, or for 4 solar hours as the average for the entire year. So a solar hour is the hour of usable sunlight where you're getting rated production from the solar panel. So if you have a 2 kilowatt system like I have sitting in my garage right now, the weather has not allowed me to install on the roof, that would mean that I'm expecting to get 8 kilowatt hours per month, or per day of production if I were to use this running average. So it's not focusing on seasons, it's a year-long average. The other thing is that the previous analysis determines that it wasn't a good idea to put solar panels on the Lincoln fire station because the panels were at that cost of $3.44 as we had mentioned. I've got a list of vendors down here that are wholesalers in the US, except for Blue Sun, they're from China, where their panels can be provided under $1 per watt, depending on the kind of system you go for. Getting that price usually involves designing your own system. They unfortunately provide kits where the design is already done for preset sizes. So here's just a quick snapshot of the market overview from the most favorable options. Ooh, that's better. Okay. So the other thing is that the previous analysis used rules for SRECs that seem to have been changed by FIJA. I found an SREC trading firm that was offering $68.89 per megawatt for 15 years as opposed to $150 per megawatt hour for 5 years as used in the previous analysis. That actually does change the numbers in a favorable way. And to further explain the 68.89, that is assuming that we're the last to try and get that SREC. If we're quicker at purchasing or selling the SRECs, we can actually get a better price. Unfortunately, the price of SRECs also decreases with the increase in production. So they're incentivizing reasonably sized installations. Lastly on here, 2 things actually. Retail prices for solar panels, no matter where they're sourced from, seem to be unchanged, even though on February 1st, the current management on the federal level decided to impose a 30% solar panel tax. So that seems to apply, at least according to the Blue Sun photovoltaic vendor, who definitely has a conflict of interest in their advisement, that seems to only apply to the exporting of panels, not a complete solar panel kit. We'll find out, but the last thing is that...
Can I interrupt you right there?
Yeah, sure.
So I understand, and it is from somebody explaining it to me on campus, that the first portion of panels that are imported would not have the tariff applied, something like X number of gigawatts worth of panels. So even though it went into effect on February 1, it wouldn't have an impact until later, but that it is on the panel, while that 344, I believe, was the installation cost, which would included the labor and the other components. So just 2 aspects to add to it, but it would not be a massive impact, as I understand it, to the cost of solar for us.
Thank you for pointing that out. And towards that end, I had actually brought those points up to the vendor, and they still insisted that, no, they're going to be in a 3% category because they're kits, but I don't really know the answer either. That's definitely worth following up. Their price is only $3,000 lower, and there are some complicated shipping aspects because it's going to arrive at a port. So takes a lot of homework to find that one out, so it's been on the back burner for a while. But this is the real interesting part. This is the financial breakdown if we were to look at a 25 kilowatt system. So this is pound for pound comparison to the previous analysis. In the blue, that is if we were to use a 2.5% interest bond. That's a number that Scott and I basically said, okay, let's try that for an analysis and see how it goes. And then on the right in the, this was actually supposed to be a light purple, it looks kind of reddish. That's if the city were to buy outright by either, increasing tax levies or running a deficit. So the green lines refer to when you get a return on investment on the bonds, assuming that they mature at that date. So if you have a later maturation date, it's not particularly relevant. That's just letting you know if you were to, for example, have a 12-year bond, which is a little specific, then you would get your return on investments at that time, but it would only be about $2,000. The number that I actually want to point out, because the budget cuts that were proposed refer to financial forecasts within the first 5 years, is so long as we're doing a bond greater than the return on investment after maturation, so long as we're doing one of those bonds that's fiscally responsible, the cumulative savings over 5 years for this installation is close to $20,000 on the year-to-year operation. So that was calculated by taking the savings on expenses from the base case cost of your electric bill minus the total interest that you're paying that year plus the total amount of revenue from the sale of SRECs. So that's where these annual savings numbers come from to show that each year would be cash positive, and that's where the cumulative number of 20,000 in a 5-year time frame were to happen. But of course, the numbers are all better if the city were to finance this without bonds. That said, the annual usage of electricity for the fire station didn't actually merit a 25 kilowatt system. With the specs given, they could have increased the amount of electricity used since then. And if that's the case, then the next slide is moot. But just assuming that the numbers that I was given are still representative, I also went ahead and did a 20 kilowatt system financial breakdown. Wasn't too hard, just copy things and then change the initial price. So that bumped it down to a 9-year return on investment for cash and an 11-year return on investment for a bond. And one thing that Scott had pointed out to me was that there are some financial limits to the debt burdens the city can adopt, and that includes time limits such as 10 years. This financial breakdown was done with a market survey that I had done in my mythical free time that does not include a request for proposals. So I had just moseyed on over to a company called Win Salil, which is where this $24,295 installation cost comes from for both systems. They're a regional installer. I'm not particularly advertising for them, except they do have a snow removal service for your panels, which is kind of nice, included in the cost. But if you were to issue a request for proposals, this could feasibly reduce the cost of installation. And if it were by $1,800 for a 20 kilowatt system, you would actually be on a 10-year return on investment for the issuance of bonds where it would be cash positive in terms of the savings each year. So that's something worth pointing out. To close off the presentation without taking up too much time, I already mentioned this is prior to request for proposals. The systems that I looked at came with 20-year product and 30-year performance warranties. There's also the possibility of using crowdfunding to subsidize the city's expenses to expedite the city's ROI, return on investment. It was also brought to my attention that a local church had done a cooperative private financing agreement so that the purchasers got the 30% tax rebate, which would significantly affect the numbers, and then they sold at remaining cost back to the church. I'm not sure if that's legal. It's worth looking into, but if it is there, it could reduce the return on investment waiting period by as much as 30%, which is great. And then in closing, for the last time, the Urbana Fire Station is not the only city building. I would like to be able to work on expanding the analysis to other buildings. By my count, with my very limited knowledge of what buildings there are in Urbana that are owned specifically by the city, I counted about 14 or 15 buildings on Google Maps. So let's say that we're able to save 20K over a 5-year period. With 14 or 15, that number goes closer to 300K, which would be about a little over 20% of the proposed budget cuts over that same time period. So I think that that's quite substantial, and I know that not every building in Urbana has new enough roofs for that to be feasible, so I'd like to continue working with you guys to parse out those details. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions?
Alan, thank you for this analysis. It's great to dig into these details. The pricing you got is just materials, is that right?
So the pricing is for a complete kit plus the installation of that complete kit from Win Salil. And so I didn't do the request for proposals on my own. That would be a little insane, but
Okay.
yeah.
So the 24,000 or something like that was an installed system?
That was the installation cost on top of the vendor quotes of their price. So their prices
okay.
are listed here,
Okay.
and then $24.95 was added onto it. I could have been a little more explicit about that, but I could have done a lot of other things, so I missed it.
Okay. Notwithstanding the tariff, and we'll see what the impact is there, the 344 was $3.44 per watt installed. That was a few years ago. I would guess it's quite a bit lower now.
Yeah.
Could be under 3. You never know till you ask for a quote. But I'm guessing it's substantially lower. Also, you mentioned that the state rec, which is going to be the most lucrative rec, is a 15-year rec. I believe that's also the payments are front-loaded. So I think you get 15 years worth of rec payments in 5 years or some such thing. So that changes the cash flow a little bit.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, it's I know it's front-loaded in some respect. And then you mentioned a church doing you call it cooperative private finance. I think that's just a PPA, power purchase agreement, and that's what we've been contemplating, because that allows, by having a third-party owner, it allows someone to take advantage of the tax equity, the 30% tax incentive, and share those savings with the off-taker of the power. It also, when you have third-party ownership, it also allows someone else, a professional who's familiar with solar arrays, to be in charge of the maintenance.
Can I comment?
It's not expertise we have on site.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me as interesting with PPAs was that I couldn't find any precedent for getting an agreement that's at a lower electric rate than what the city's negotiated already, which is why I had actually cut that from the analysis. But if we could talk more about how that stipulation would accommodate for those changes in cost, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, a PPA is basically, it does two things. One, it takes advantage of that 30% federal tax credit, because a tax-burdened person is the owner, tax-burdened company is the owner. And then it also, it's essentially a financing mechanism. It's another way to do a loan, essentially. But you get the benefit of the tax equity, and you get the benefit of not having to maintain that equipment for some period of time, 20 or 25 years, whatever the agreement calls for. In terms of city facilities with new roofs, the fire station that we're looking at has a roof that's a year and a half old, so that's perfect. The next best roof we have is this building, but only part of the building has a new roof. And after that, we're really not well positioned in terms of roof age. We'd be looking at installing a system, 5 years later uninstalling it, replacing the roof, reinstalling it, and having to build all those extra maintenance costs or labor costs into the cash flow. So we don't have a lot of options, but what we want to develop is a good procedure for this, where we have this perfect opportunity at the fire station in terms of a new roof, and then have that prepared every time that we repair or replace another roof. So as soon as it happens, we're moving forward with another solar procurement.
Okay. I just wanted to add that there's also MLK Elementary, as mentioned by the school board. You had mentioned before that may or may not be within the purview, but it's still included in the city budget, so I think.
Well, the school district is completely separate from the city. So we own 6 or 7 buildings. The school district is separate. The sanitary district is separate. The health department is separate. Water utility is separate. Electric utility is separate. Mass transit district is separate. There's probably townships separate. Counties separate. There's more, I'm sure. So we own and control 6 or 7 buildings. Now, that said, if any of those folks want to talk about the best way to move forward on their facilities, that's something we do. We help.
So the financial breakdown that actually included the budget cuts included school expenses in there, so I'm a little bit confused on that, but we can follow up on that offline to figure out how that all works, and of course contact the school district to go, hey, do this please. But yeah, that's why I had mentioned that, because we had gone around that circle before, but then I brought it up again because of the financial breakdown.
Scott, is the Park District buildings, those are not owned by the city?
Thank you. I knew there was another one. Park
Okay.
District is a separate taxing body, separate district, separate budget, separate board.
They have such a nice metal roof.
Yeah.
In the office building.
Yeah.
Sounds like an engagement opportunity. And the library is separate, right?
Quasi-separate.
Okay. But that's okay. That just means that we have a lot of people all working towards the same goal from different directions. It's amazing. What do we have to do to actually do this? It sounds great. Let's do it. What do we have to do?
So, 2 different models. One is what Alan has presented, which is a loan and a cash purchase. Another is a power purchase agreement. Either way, it's a request for proposal or an invitation to bid.
And to tack onto that, I don't view a PPA and bond as necessarily mutually exclusive, depending on how it's done. We have to parse that out more.
Yeah, I suppose you could do third-party ownership. Well, there's no point in the city getting a loan and making a cash purchase if they're not the owner.
Mm-hmm.
So those might be separate. That's, in terms of the IRS, there has to be clarity there that, who's owning it.
Fair point.
So you have to do an RFP to move forward either way, but, right? Or could it be done through the solar UC? Is that an option? It's only, 25 kilowatts would fit that model, I think.
We'd have to have an internal discussion to determine if MREA's procurement meets the standards of our procurement rules.
And then there would need to be, if not, there would need to be a decision about whether to move with a PPA or a bond.
Mm-hmm.
And I know nothing about bonds. But to do either one of those, you'd have different RFPs, like a PPA RFP would be looking for something. You wouldn't be able to do one RFP that could give you pricing for both, right? You'd have to be.
No.
So you really need to make a decision about which of these 3 execution methodologies you want to use, but all three of them, solar UC, a PPA, or a bond, this, what would you call this, a bond plan, would, with the SRECs and the current incentives, would save the city money
On some timeline.
over the next 5 to 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, we should do whatever it takes to save money, especially if it brings us cleaner energy. In case you didn't know that.
Is the 25 kilowatt size of the array, is that just sized to match up with current usage? Can you fit something larger, and why wouldn't you do it larger if you could?
So you can fit a larger array on there. Because I was nudged to get a 10-year ROI if possible, or to aim for that, when I decided to no longer look at a pound-for-pound comparison to where things are at now, which, by the way, this cost puts it more at about $2.50 per watt, actually under for the 25 kilowatt. But anyway, so two things apply. The reason that a smaller system, with the market overview that I've done, so I could definitely take another swing at looking at larger ones, has a faster rate of return is because of one is the lower upfront capital, which is then going to be part of the principal for compounded interest, and two is, and this didn't apply for the 20 kilowatt system, but in general, the lower the capacity of the system, the more per unit value of the SRECs with the pricing schemes that I've seen. But it's still the case that the more you produce, the more SRECs you can sell. So I don't know if there would be some sort of nonlinear trade-off governing size with production, or sorry, size with economic feasibility.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good idea. I was just curious, like, there's no reason to just think of this in terms of meeting the fire department's energy needs. We would think of it in terms of meeting the city's energy needs, which we should pack on as much on every roof that we can, I would think.
So I don't think if you're just getting, in terms of producing a kilowatt hour that the building doesn't use, if you're just doing that to get the SREC sale, that's probably not financially viable. If a facility overproduces on a 12-month timeline, you don't get paid for that from the power company. The net metering rules are such that it's like rollover minutes on your phone. You can get credits or use credits up month to month, but at the end of a 12-month period, any overproduction you get zeroed out on and you don't get paid for, and you start over. That's done so that systems are sized just to satisfy the demand at their building, and that way the power company doesn't necessarily have to upgrade infrastructure because one building decided they wanted to be a power company and overproduce.
Yeah.
So in that sense, what is typical practice is to size it for something like 75-85% of your annual consumption, ensuring that you never overproduce and give away free electricity to the power company. One other consideration, two other considerations. We're currently in an electric supply contract that goes through June 2019, and so our prices will reset then. It's hard to speculate what the future will be, but on a long timeline, the standard practice is to use a 3% escalation on grid electricity price. The other consideration is, a long time ago, a year and a half ago, we did a procurement for a power purchase agreement at the Arbor shop, and as far as I can tell, that was the first power purchase agreement for a public sector agency in Illinois. There must be others out there, but I just can't find them. And we didn't know if that was going to be viable, meaning we didn't know if the year one electricity price that we would pay the PPA holder was going to meet or beat our existing electric supply costs, and it did. So it's one of those things, costs come down and you don't know if it's viable until you get a quote. On some timeline, the same is going to be true when pairing an Ameren time of use tariff, electric tariff, with a battery backup. It's on some timeline, the price for battery backup will decline to where solar plus battery plus time of use pricing is viable. So that's a consideration, whether we want to test that market and see what the prices are for those three together. But we can't go to an Ameren time of use tariff until July 2019 because we're in a supply contract.
And one thing to just add on the excess electrical production and the net metering incentive, more of a quip, so I'll be brief, is one could also do hydroponics or indoor agriculture with that excess electricity so that you can create goods that you can sell locally.
It sounds like to me, so there are additional considerations for the purposes of even putting out an RFP on the fire station, and I would like to propose that we would have this discussion item for some future continuing business to give some time to Alan, if you want to continue sort of volunteering your time and doing some analysis, and if Scott, you want to consider working on this a little bit more. I'm not proposing to put this on the next month's agenda, but maybe to have it 3 months from now, to give that bit of time that's needed to really more carefully consider a lot of the options that are on the table. And it sounds like maybe there's something with the 2019 timeline here because of Ameren and time of use pricing and things like that. So I don't know, would the commission be amenable to putting this on the agenda for continuing business in May?
I guess I'm not sure why it needs to be that long. We're in February, right? How about April? I was thinking March, but then, okay, April. Yeah. Because we're talking about checking if the solar UC would meet city requirements, right? That's one piece. And doing further analysis about other facilities and like the PPA option and things like that, right?
I'll just turn around. Scott, how much time do you think you would like to have before bringing this back to another meeting?
Why don't we put it on the April meeting, and I'll let you know if we need another month.
Excellent. All right, sounds great. Ellen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wait, one more question.
Yep.
Do we need any input from the fire department? I mean, do they get to have a say, or is it creating any kind of potential conflict or anything?
I don't think they're actively using the roof.
Okay. I don't know. Like, maybe like climbing up there and...
It's a good point, though.
Rappelling down, or I have no idea.
Yeah.
I just want to add, when we commissioned the U of I solar farm, we had all the we had a group of fire safety professionals trained, because there are certain things that they should know. So I think it's something that could be beneficial to them to have it at their own facility.
Could I ask a financing question? So I know when we were talking about the energy efficiency measures that there were certain payback period minimums that proposed projects had to meet to be considered. Is that correct on the energy conservation measures?
The city does not have a policy. In terms of a guaranteed energy savings contract pursuant to state statute, that's a 20-year requirement.
Okay, so these where the return on investment is shooting for 9 or 11 or 15 years, that...
It's not applicable anyway unless you're
Okay.
following a guaranteed energy savings project procedure.
Okay. Do you think that these payback periods would be acceptable to the city for this project?
What matters is year one cash flow.
Okay.
Wasn't the issue about the bond period?
Say again?
Wasn't there an issue about what the city bonds for? Is it a 10-year period or?
It's a question of what lenders would provide to the city. Yeah.
Well, and to pipe up about this, one mechanism that I was enthusiastically proposing in my initial emails to Scott was, what if we had the city somehow issue bonds to the residents to invest back in the city? So there's some interesting things that we could do once we get that offer from the bank in terms of issuing the bonds. It might not necessarily be issued to the city per se, but the city might be able to work through some agreements with the banks where they issue bonds to the residents. Maybe.
To present and to begin a discussion with us on sustainability funding sources. We've met before with some youth members from the I Matter committee and also from the Sierra Club campaign for Ready for 100 campaign, and we had discussed in those meetings the sort of urgent need in this sort of like space and time to be able to come up or find funding sources to be able to meet the goals of reducing greenhouse gases and increase renewables in the near future between now and 2040. So, Councillor, thank you very much for being here with us this evening. I certainly appreciate your passion and enthusiasm on the subject, and I look forward to what you will present to us this evening.
Okay. Now, I sent some slides to Scott midday. I don't know if those are accessible here, or if not,
do
I'll
you have
just...
it on a USB?
Oh, I didn't put it on a USB. I could do that quickly, or I could just talk through the concepts and... oh, terrific. Thank you. Now pause for the duration of a 79-year-old technology
Anyone have any good trivia questions?
Okay, and now we drag to Scott's USB. Let's see if we got there. Connection failed. I'll just talk you through it. So, because for whatever reason that's not working, but that's okay. So the question is a sustainability tax for Urbana, and what I have tried to do here is to sort of outline what I think you would have to bring to the City Council to have a chance that the Council would adopt it, or to maximize the chances the Council would adopt it. I have not spoken about this particular concept to anybody on Council. So my thoughts on this are just based on having sat through several hundred Council meetings, several hundred meetings with my Council colleagues, and I kind of know what is important to each of them. I know what's important to me, and I know what's important to you, and of course we share some deep convictions about what's important to the world. So we're going to try to figure out how that, where all of those Venn diagrams intersect, or I'll give you my best thoughts on where those Venn diagrams intersect. Yay. Okay, look at that. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so here's the rationale. Now, of course, you all understand this rationale, but I'm thinking about the council, and I'm thinking about what the council has to say to the community as a whole in order to levy a tax on them, an additional tax, which is, you have no idea how hard that is. So obviously one is that the present and future damaging effects on the climate of human carbon emissions are becoming clear and increasingly serious. Federal government has abandoned its efforts to control carbon emissions, so it's increasingly up to state and local governments in partnership with private entities, where that's feasible, to attack the problem. And of course, our particular state isn't in such great shape either. So, so maybe it's really up to us. Now, here are the hazards. Here are the counter-arguments. Start right with it. What's the pushback? The pushback is increased taxes may damage Urbana's economic competitiveness. Increased taxes may inhibit beneficial activity. And increased taxes may be regressive. Some taxes are. That is, they'll hit harder on low-income people. So the question is, how do we optimize the benefit to the hazard ratio? So one way to do this, and this is something I think that, you know, this really came from Scott, and I think it's a good idea, is seek partnership with the city of Champaign so that we minimize any tax disparity between the citizens of the two cities. It's something we are always mindful of. Are we putting ourselves in a disadvantage in terms of attracting residents, attracting businesses to Urbana? Also, if we do something together with Champaign, Champaign's twice as big as we are, so any benefits are multiplied by a factor of 3. You know, the benefit to the world. So it's just really the right thing to do. Now, target the tax to be levied on carbon emission. Now, natural gas, Scott has discovered, is we may not be able to increase our tax on natural gas because of statutory tax caps. Gasoline tax is pretty straightforward to do. But again, we don't want people to go out of their way to buy gasoline in Champaign as opposed to Urbana. And then the other thing that's really important to people, target expenditures, if we can, to serve the expenditures that, from the tax revenue to serve economic justice as well as sustainability. I've put in a few examples. Others of you can really think of more, but home weatherization, installation of raised vegetable gardens, that was a thought that came from Naomi, and it's a good one. She's involved with some people who do that. Installation of solar panels, and we heard about solar panels on city buildings, but we can subsidize solar panels on individual homes, subsidized conversion of natural gas to electric heating. All of these efforts could be focused on in low-income areas, which we can target by census data, and could utilize minority and women-owned contracting businesses to do the work, which again, we went through a long exercise last night in thinking about new priorities for the city. And so I'm just trying to hit as many different points that people expressed interest in as I can. And so the desired action, I think what would really be a good thing to do is if the Sustainability Commission can send to the council a document in support of the creation of a sustainability tax with all of these elements in it. It should be optimized with respect to maximize impact on carbon emissions, to incorporate economic justice as well as sustainability goals, and to minimize any impact on Urbana's competitiveness. If we can think of a way to improve Urbana's economic competitiveness by this, if, for example, incentives to attract a solar panel manufacturer, I mean, just whatever, that would be all to the good. If I believe, you know, I can't promise and often can't predict what the council will do, but my judgment is that if you hit all three of these things, if it will help our carbon footprint, if it will incorporate economic justice as well as sustainability goals, and economic justice and racial justice are very, very closely intertwined because there's economic issues seem to go along with racial discrimination, and we can minimize impact on Urbana's economic competitiveness. If you can hit all three of those targets, then I think there's a very good chance that the city will go for it and will ask staff to craft a plan, and we'll ask the mayor to begin discussions with Champaign for partnering. And I think that's all I've got. Yeah.
Don't we already have a gasoline tax?
Oh, we sure do. So it's a question of it would be a question of increasing gasoline tax. And of course, we have a gas on natural gas, but we don't have a cap on a gasoline tax. It's the only tax is we don't want to, price ourselves out of the market. And
How do you evaluate levelizing with Champaign?
how do I evaluate that?
Levelizing with Champaign.
Oh.
I mean, I guess the idea of a partnership, but
Well, so by levelizing, I would think, well, the things that we look at are hotel motel tax, sales tax, gasoline tax, property taxes. So we're very, very conscious of where we stand relative to Champaign in all of those areas, and we're very conscious of that if we are levying taxes in those areas that are way more way heavier than Champaign, that it's we get the revenue in the immediate term, but in the long term we may really lose that revenue.
What sort of ideas are there for, maybe this is the wrong time to ask, but what sort of ideas are there for driving that economic, economic development for sustainability? Like you said, if we could bring in a solar manufacturer, I think that's a great idea. We should definitely do that.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Yeah, we all want to do that. It reminds me of a Monty Python skit where they were interviewing a celebrity who said, yes, and what are your plans for this afternoon? Well, I'm going to world
peace.
Produce world peace, yes. So yeah, I mean, there are also, I think actually it would be terrific for this group to brainstorm about that and to present to the council and the mayor, of course.
Like hydroponics.
Yeah, hydroponics. And what a great, I mean, that had not occurred to me.
It's a very viable market.
And it's a little bit like the thing Naomi said to me at breakfast about raised vegetable gardens that got into the got into the presentation. So I think brainstorming about all of the things that we think we would like to see. Now, somebody on council last night, Jared Miller, talked about, hey, we ought to maybe invest in more electric charging stations for electric vehicles. And I didn't include that here because I didn't see how that fit in with tying everything to economic justice. but on the other hand, it's a good thing to do all in and of itself. But yeah, I think brainstorming about the thing. I mean, maybe I don't know if there's a business model for hydroponic, hydroponic food production. The only hydroponic agriculture that I've seen was a number of years ago at Archer Daniels Midland. So I don't, they were doing that experimentally, wondering whether they were going to branch out in, as part of their business model. And it doesn't look as though they've done it. At least I don't know that they have. But it's probably, since they were thinking about it in those hard-nosed business terms, it's probably not a crazy thing to think about. And if we could become a center for that, that would be terrific. And actually that, I mean, we are, Urbana, there's a very, very strong feeling in Urbana about locavorism. You know, the farmer's market is tremendously popular. We all love the farmer's market. The council and the mayor love the farmer's market. We've got Sola Grazia. Yeah, I think, yeah, we ought to research. I haven't done that. I didn't Google hydroponic food industry, but we ought to think about a whole bunch of things like that that could stamp us as, you know, and of course, if we become stamped as a place to live because we think sustainability is cool, and we attract people who think sustainability is cool, if that can become a selling point, that's, you know, that's terrific. That, I mean, I'm sort of, I think even to myself I sound cynical because I keep thinking in marketing terms, but we're going to be faced.
But it is, it's a building a brand. It's building who we are.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was raised here, and that is who we are.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about it? Why don't we communicate? I was talking about, we have all these different government agencies, government bodies. All of them, I firmly believe that all of them have an interest in being more sustainable.
Yes.
You know, so that's thousands of people in this town who have this as part of their vision and their job and their lifestyle. And I was talking to a student this morning about, you know, well, we're everywhere.
Right.
Look around you. There's, you know, do you recycle? She said yes. I said, does your friend recycle? She said, I don't know. I said, well, ask them. And then if they don't, say, what the heck? Why aren't you recycling?
Yeah.
Right? And we don't have that. It's there, but it's kind of underneath the surface. And I can see the building that brand and acknowledging who we've always been. The big grove. Yeah. We've been protecting trees since before we existed. Yeah. So,
well, if we can build that brand, convert that brand into a revenue stream in some way, in a couple of months, we're going to look at the budget. And I don't know if everybody is aware of this, but university obviously was hit very hard by the state's inability to pass a budget. But a lot of that was transmitted to the city in terms of things like sales tax revenues, hotel motel revenues, because as the university contracted, for example, its hiring, then there's a ripple effect, and all of our projections for revenue we didn't meet. We came short of those, and it was a ripple effect from the problems that the university had, which were a reflection of the problems that the state, you know, they were inflicted by the state. So, so we have, so last couple of years, I mean, Scott can tell you, because this runs through the city building, there are shivers of sort of, gosh, where is something going to be cut? Whereas people aren't being laid off, but sometimes they're not replaced. So, if anything that we can think about to turn sustainability into a brand that can generate revenue, that would be so wonderful. There's nothing better than doing well by doing good.
Can I ask one more question? You mentioned a couple months from now. Is there, what would be the timeline on this kind of letter?
That's up to you. I think we can field it anytime. I don't think there's really a better time in the budget cycle than any other time. I don't think. I'm trying to think about what the impact of it would be. It may be that if it doesn't come, let's say, within a month from now, maybe it should come after we do the budget, because I think April and May are going to be really consumed. We'll be hearing from each of the department heads. We'll be looking at economic forecasts. The mayor will be thinking really hard about how to juggle it all. The assessor told us that his predecessor had made some mistakes in how properties were assessed, and it may be that when he's finished with what he's doing, which he promises by the end of May, that I don't know. I mean, I can hope that that it's going to mean that the property tax revenues will go up, but it could equally mean that they're going to go down. So, but he warned us that he thinks there are going to be some changes, that some of our assessments are out of the range of what are prescribed by state statutes, out of the range relative to, best judgment about market values. So, so it's a time of uncertainty. And it may be that either before we're in the thick of dealing with that uncertainty, or maybe after we have dealt with it and passed a budget, one of those two would be the best time for us to field this.
So as difficult a time as this is to talk about a new tax, and a sustainability tax would give us, a source of funds to fund programs and services associated with trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, for example. The flip side of this is also maybe a sustainability tax credit, which does more to perhaps attract certain kinds of businesses and promote the sustainability brand in a more positive way than would a sustainability tax. So I don't know. I think that's probably equally as difficult to float in this budget climate. But it also gets to our earlier discussion about particular economic sectors like the commercial sector and how to incentivize reductions on their side. The sustainability tax credit could help with that effort, I think, as well. So
psychologically, I don't know why this is, but I've seen it time and again. Psychologically, tax credits are an easier sell than taxes. I mean, they're really equivalent to the same thing. They are, you are a tax credit is a public expenditure, but it doesn't. My experience is, again, I can't promise or even predict how my colleagues will react, but I've seen again and again that tax credits are easier sells than taxes.
Could we suggest a tax just to fund a tax credit? So it's it's zero net, but it's like everybody contributes a little bit and then it
Yeah.
gives a credit to bring in a sustainable business. Does that exist?
Well,
I
you know,
mean,
what I really like is, I don't know if it's feasible. We should ask, our financial person. But the notion of selling, this idea that came earlier, that was brand new to me, but sounds really cool, is selling sustainability bonds to one's own citizens. I mean, they have to be, people have to have confidence that they're going to get their money back. But if we're going to borrow anyway, borrowing from our own people sounds to me really great. I mean, it's sort of like the food co-op. We turn Urbana into a great big co-op. Wow, Co-op City, that's a brand.
There's also a question of, if we were to obtain funds, what would we do with those funds? And so your question about, could you do that to provide an incentive or a rebate? I mean, I think very much can fall into that sort of, that line of questioning. Well, what do we do with that anyway? And there are probably some, different opportunities for incentivizing different actions, whether or not those incentives go to residents, or if they go to businesses, or if they're incentives for more public good toward other projects.
Well, something that I think is very I think things that involve some sort of capital expenditures or contracting work at this particular time will be very attractive. And the reason is that we really want to encourage local minority and women-owned contractors. The mayor has this as a very, very explicit objective that she wants to do, and I think the council concurs with that. I concur with that. So if the expenditures on a sustainability tax are in the form of something that could be contracted out, like installation of solar panels, like weatherization, like the examples I chose because they are of that ilk, because if we increase the total amount of contracting that we're doing to small businesses, then we can increase our use of minority and women-owned contractors, but not reduce, not impact the contractors who have been getting the business already. I mean, there's a certain tension there, because we have contractors who are majority owned, or old white guys, and they've been doing a terrific job for us. And if we can continue to use them, but also bring minorities and women-owned small businesses into the mix, I think that is really a win-win, and I think that will help to sell a sustainability tax. That's one of the kinds of things that really could help that.
Okay, are there any other questions from the commission at this point? I'd like to open the floor to any members of the public that would like to offer comment or their opinions or ideas on this subject. Okay, so I kind of propose this to everybody in the room. When we're considering an idea like this, when we're taking this on and are interested, but maybe a little bit like hesitant, right? As a board, hesitant to say, are we going to be the board that is going to ask for a tax increase for Urbana Eek? I don't know. That's a little bit scary, right? I would I want to question and put the question out there. What are some things that what are some of the things that we would want to research, understand more, need to know more about, have a more concrete, idea, more, more information on this in order for us to make progress and to bring this to the next meeting to talk about. I'm cognizant that it's a little bit after 9 o'clock, but for where would we want this discussion to go? What do we want this discussion to evolve into, and what information do we need for the next meeting, for the next steps, for us to feel good about continuing this conversation?
Are there other models out there? Would be one thing. Anything that we can look to as a model, other communities, whatever. And I think, to the point raised about, we want to be competitive with Champaign. I guess, some threshold analysis, where, on these different, tax item benchmarks, where do we stand? And I mean, I haven't done that, but are we at a deficit? Are we about even? Are we, is there wiggle room? That would be another thing that I'd be interested in seeing.
Okay. Yeah, we can compile that. I think on balance overall, we are relatively. I think we're relatively on a level playing ground. The thing that we really worry about, Champaign has definitely a more vigorous business climate, and so their businesses, contribute a lot more. And we had this tremendous hit when Carle Hospital was granted a tax exemption. Yeah, but we could certainly, I think, ask staff to. We could certainly ask Elizabeth to. Actually, that would be a very. I mean, I think that's a very useful thing for the council to see. Anyway, so I think we can. I think if you pass a request through Todd to ask to ask Elizabeth about that and keep the mayor in the loop. She doesn't want to be surprised about anything like this. She'll want to know these conversations are going on. And I have not talked to the mayor about a sustainability tax. She'll, she's an environmentalist, but she's also very, very worried about the dollars. So we'll see.
So one other, I guess one other thing that I would throw in is, so you talked about the revenue side, but, and I'm not quite sure how to, if there's anything concrete that we can say at this point, but if in the course of dialogue, if we have insight into budget impacts, so like, certain kinds of activities you spend here, maybe it has impacts, and it could be long-term on reducing spending for certain types of services.
Right.
I mean, we keep going back to, okay, you put a solar panel and you have less electricity expenses at some point. But at some things maybe we connect with infrastructure spending, or maybe we connect with social services. And anyway, a little bit more complicated and case specific, but
right.
If we can keep that open as a thing, that I imagine that would be helpful.
We really need, you're describing really an input-output model,
Yeah.
And we really need it would be lovely to have an input-output model for the city. I don't know if anybody at the university would like to assign that to a student as a thesis topic. But we, one knows how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, Bruce Hannon headed a group that did an input-output energy model for the entire United States a few decades ago. The knowledge is out there. That would be an interesting thing to ask around if somebody could, because that's exactly what you're describing, and that would be so valuable.
Alan, would you like to come up and address your question?
Just going to sit next to you, but
I'll sit next to you.
okay. So a while ago, I had spoken to Bill Brown about whether or not the city had ever engaged in crowdfunding before, and he had informed me that in the past they have, so that they didn't upset a certain segment of the city council, but could still fund things like the public arts program. So to my mind, there's very little difference in efficacy of crowdfunding versus a tax levy, and this would be as democratic as it would to be passing that tax levy just without the contention.
I think it's a great idea. We can look at the at how the arts program did that. I'm suspecting that the amount of money we're talking about here is a lot more than was the case for the arts program. On the other hand, the principle is really it should be pursued. It absolutely should be pursued.
Yeah, so that was just my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
So, I guess if we want to make a recommendation for a tax on sustainability related to sustainability that would support economic development and social justice and climate mitigation and adaptation, I would need to know a little bit more about what constitutes economic development. It's not something that I personally have any education in.
If it's any activity that raises more tax revenue than it requires services, it's economic development.
So, like, somebody finding a way to, or people building things here, or offering, like, green insurance programs and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could have fun, and it might be useful to brainstorm about green economic development and to maybe, Google it and think about it and think about all of the things that, we might incentivize that would be the mirror image of actually expenditures.
Would it be helpful to learn, to get maybe a packet or an overview of what the city's current economic development efforts include?
Yeah.
Or
yeah. I mean, we've got to. So the
should I
person.
just read the website somewhere?
Yeah. So the person who can present that, would be somebody from our, economic development person. I think Brandon Boyes is probably the right person to make that presentation, and Brandon could give an overview of what the city is aiming for and what the city is doing with respect to economic development. And so this would, obviously you want the short version, and but this includes tax increment financing districts, It includes the type of things that we are doing. It includes, the thinking that we really have this tremendous need to revitalize the mall, the Lincoln Square, and to resuscitate the hotel at the corner of Lincoln Square. So, how is... I'm just shaking my head about the hotel because the guy who owns it is such a nuisance. I just said that in a public meeting, but he really is. And so to us, he may be a fine person in other ways, but to us, he's at this moment, he's not a help. But so we have to either, we're working around him and whatever. So anyway, Brandon's the right person. Brandon will be more politic than I shouldn't say anything else.
All right, any other questions or comments? I have taken a bunch of notes and we'll review the video again to get some ideas going forward. But thank you for bringing the topic this evening as an introduction, and we look forward to exploring it further. Thank you very much, Councillor Jacobson. Okay. The last item on our agenda this evening is a discussion about the Off Fossil Fuels Act. And Lois, if you would like to come up to the table to answer any questions. I'll apologize in advance. We may not be able to give as much time to the agenda item as we would like. So I will entertain any proposals from the commissioners in terms of if we need to wrap up, or if we what questions we have on this item. We've been inviting you here tonight to talk about the Off Fossil Fuels Act would sort of wrap up, in a way, discussions that we've been having about local campaigns on reducing fossil fuel use and increasing renewable energy. So we've heard from the iMatter campaign, the Ready for 100 campaign, and also from you on the Off Fossil Fuels Act. And so I would invite you to give a brief overview into any advances or things going on at the state level regarding the bill. I believe that this had a specific state component to it, and I don't know if there was any kind of advancement at the legislature on the bill.
Yeah, basically it's Congress. It's a federal bill, but we had varying levels of the campaign to get a lot of encouragement support for the bill. There's actually now 26 co-sponsors, and over 111 congressional candidates have signed a pledge. So if they get elected, they're going to support this and become co-sponsors. And David Gill and John Ebel both have signed that pledge. And there's also 160 elected officials from around the country now. So anyone from, any kind of elected position, 160 now have signed that. So it's making its way up, through the system. And and just in terms of states, 100% off bills have been introduced in New York, Maryland, Colorado, New Jersey, and California. So a lot of states and cities are now adopting this 100% off by 2035. And that's what's different about the iMatter and the Sierra Club. And this is actually, I was writing down some things that people said, and it's really interesting. All kinds of things that people said tonight are completely covered in this bill. It's really amazing. From what Amanda was talking about, collective impact and systems thinking and community creativity. It's to funding, to Morgan said something about it's interesting to see, you know, who owns the roofs in Urbana, but a lot of different people working towards the same goals from different directions, which is basically what's happening with the OFF Act across the country, with Sarah Club and iMatter and 350.org. Everyone's got their own campaign going to keep the pressure on, but this is an actual bill. So if there's some way that you all could, you know, we could think, you could put it on the next meeting if you want to, or the idea was hopefully for you all to encourage our city council to basically endorse the OFF Act. It's, you know, the most aggressive, it's the most bold, it's the most far-reaching Climate Act ever, you know, introduced, and you know, there's a lot of things going on in this country right now, and this tax overhaul is really going to damage any kind of climate actions taken. It just everything from Exxon plans to build 50 billion, put in 50 billion over 5 years and triple production. You know, it's just things like that. That this tax bill is just going to just hurt the climate movement left and right, and it's just a way to keep the pressure on. So that's really. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read the bill yet, but you know, it's pretty far-reaching. Everything from, you know, minority groups and women, and it's just community action. So that's it.
Lois, I've got in my notes one item in the bill, or maybe it was from the pledge, from the elected official pledge, which I think is the ask here. And will oppose any project that will expand fossil fuel production and its use or transport. I presume that would mean if there was a permit request for a natural gas pipeline in Urbana, that the elected officials pledging this would oppose that. That could be a challenging thing to ask folks to pledge.
It already is.
A consideration.
Yeah, it is. And at the moment, it's just a pledge. I mean, just like, you know, cities across the country saying they're going to go 100% renewable by 2040 or 2050. It's just a pledge. But the idea is to keep the pressure on. It's just if more and more people are out there beating the street and harassing their elected officials and asking them to, like, you know, this is the most pressing issue we have right now that humans are facing, and just keep the pressure on. And, you know, of course, we can't be off fossil fuels by tomorrow anyway, but, you know. So.
I was interested in the idea of so there's a mandate in this that applies to the utilities, and, you know, anyways, it was so as I read it, and I wondered, you know, so what I wondered about is, you know, in the current climate, so there's no way, like, I just don't, you know, there's a lot of resistance to that, and it's, you know, you mentioned, you know, 24 sponsors, and anyway, that's not enough. And so partially I'm wondering, like, is this, you know, I know that it's a real bill, and it's sincere. Is the idea that we're, you know, so who are we advocating to? You know, are we, you know, but if the city, you know, does a pledge, are we advocating to anybody in particular at the federal level? You know, are we, you know, saying something to, you know, to our federal representatives? And is this symbolic and intended to, you know, say, or maybe just keep going for the next, you know, several years, where, you know, maybe we'll see some, you know, some turnover? I guess what's the, anyways, so as I look at the mandate and just see the just the political unreality right now of telling the utilities you're going to be 100% anything. Anyways, I just wonder if you can talk to some of those questions.
Basically, it's actually I can't probably really answer any questions in depth, to be honest. I'm just a activist and jumping on the the campaign because I believe that basically we're just frying the planet, which probably everybody in this room thinks the same thing, and if we don't do something more than say, okay, we're going to be off 80% by 2050, well, that's way too late. So really, I think the push behind this is it's a sincere attempt to get America to understand that we're in a lot of trouble, that we can't wait, we can't put this off. It's getting more and more people around the country, citizens around the country to support in any way they can fossil fuels. At this point, we've changed light bulbs, people walk, people ride their bicycles, we compost, we, collect rainwater, that kind of thing, but we can't do anything else. It's the government now. And when we just need to come together as American citizens and try to move our government, which at this point, it really is impossible. Well, look who's in the White House. Look what's happening right now. But you could just say, okay, well then forget it. What's the point? But there is a point. It's our planet. And it's like Rebecca was in here with I Matter, future generations. It's everything. Everything's at stake here. And if we just sit back and say, well, we got to wait for Trump to be out of office, there's so much damage going to be done. I mean, it's being done right now. And we just got to come together here and, I don't know, just don't give up the fight yet, really. I mean, that's how I look at it. I'm a pretty pessimistic myself. But you can't really, throw in the towel and say, well, I'm just going to go, grow some flowers and whatever. I mean, you can't really turn your back on this. So that's what I feel about it.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions at this point?
Probably I would like to ask if these actions regarding the bill are pursued with the hope that the midterm election would probably change the balance of forces, so that not only the process who will get to be elected, but also if a real balance shift of power is achieved, maybe this bill will have some chance of passing. Is that the kind of thinking behind it?
I'm not sure. Tulsi Gabbard introduced it in September, and I don't know if that was part of the reasoning for putting it out there, but I mean, all we can do is hit the streets, I mean, look at our own representative for this District 13, who sends me, his response is that he's, for all the above, and it's a ridiculous bill, basically, in his opinion, but, he's got a 3% voting record with the League of Conservation Voters, so, yeah, sure. If we could switch what's happening in the House, yeah. There's a chance that, more and more would get on it, and maybe there's some moderate Republicans who might join on. I mean, you never know, but,
Okay. So I just want to thank you for your passion and your sort of your knowledge on the subject as well, and your willingness to come before us and bring this up. I am certainly sort of interested in continuing to learn more and to read the bill for myself. I admit that I haven't, but I will commit myself to go ahead and read it, and would like to just take the opportunity to understand it better, and to explore things that we could do at the commission level that are, working towards pushing the city of Urbana in the direction of making progress on some of these issues. I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect right now with how to take from, being the city commission to how we can effectively impact federal legislation. So there's a little bit of question there about what we would do with it. I would be speaking for myself when I say that I certainly support the efforts that are being made nationally to keep the pressure on the issues of climate change. And I think that, as I've been reading in newspapers and sort of like in recent polls, that climate change right now is more on the forefront and sort of like the tip of the tongue of people sort of nationally than it has been in the past. And so I think that we are seeing that shift from where sustainability and climate change was super unpopular just even a few short years ago, that it's sort of shifting back again into the sort of collective consciousness. And I think it's because of people like you and other activists around the country that are getting that messaging out there and are making the noises to be heard. And I think that is so important.
And my brain kind of flipped out there. There is a state element to this, and that is the elected officials. It would be Carol Ammons and Scott Bennett, which I did speak with Scott Bennett, but I haven't had a chance to speak with Carol Ammons yet. And so those would be the state representatives that could sign on to this, that could help bring the pressure on the legislature, that kind of thing. So it is the grassroots citizens signing it, to elected officials signing it, to a state thing, to the. So there is a state thing. I kind of skipped over it there, so sorry.
That's okay. No, but I'm glad to know that. So I look forward to sort of the updates to see how that's going.
Yeah, every time I check, there's another one or two co-sponsors. So it's working its way up. But I mean, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What? Are there any members of the public that would like to ask a question or provide any comments on the last agenda item? Okay, not hearing any. Moving into announcements. On our agenda this evening, there is an announcement. There is a movie being shown called To the Ends of the Earth on Friday, March 2nd, 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. at the Channing Murray Foundation. That is all I have about it. I'm not sure what the movie is specifically about or who is endorsing. Yeah?
It's a Food and Water Watch sponsored film, and it's, I was going to send you all an invitation with a link to the Facebook page and also to the website for the film, because the film is pretty, it's much deeper than just we got to go to windmills and solar panels. It's a whole change of society, and it's very interesting. I'll send you all an invitation.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other announcements? Morgan?
I'd like to just announce Champaign County Sustainability Network, CCNet, is hosting, in collaboration with Riggs Beer Company, a green drinks on Friday from 5:30 to 7 at Riggs, which is on High Cross Road, correct? High Cross Road. And there's also a CCNet regular third Thursday lunch on February 15th at noon at the relatively new Broadway, what's it called, Scott? Broadway Food Hall, which is a really fascinating new business area in downtown Urbana that we want to go visit as sustainability advocates. And finally, CCNet is hosting an hour-and-a-half lunch and learn at the IBEW on March 15th, which is called Solar is Rising, and we will have a panel discussion, a group of panelists talking about different aspects of the solar efforts in our area. So Friday at 5:30.
The topic for the CCNet lunch is using economic incentives for promoting adaptive reuse of buildings in the city of Urbana.
Okay, are there any other announcements? Okay, not hearing any. Is there a move to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Second it?
Aye.
Aye. None.